Save it for your funeral, Mom. My daughter slammed the piggy bank on the table like it was trash. When I picked it up and felt something moving inside, I realized she might be right about one thing. My life was really about to end. That piggy bank sitting on my kitchen counter right now holds more secrets than I ever imagined possible. And it all started with my youngest daughter's cruel words that cut deeper than any knife ever could. Save it for your funeral, Mom. She said it with such casual venom, like she was commenting on the weather, as she placed that delicate porcelain pig with its hand-painted flowers right there between my coffee mug and the stack of unpaid bills I'd been avoiding all morning. I'm 72 years old, and I thought I'd heard everything by now. 5 years since Harold passed, and I've been running this little craft store that his mother left me, keeping busy, keeping my head above water, keeping my mouth shut about how hard it really gets some days. But those 6 words from Sarah, my baby girl, the one I carried for 9 months and raised through every scraped knee and broken heart, those words just sat there in my chest like a stone I couldn't swallow. The fight had been about money, of course, always about money these days. Sarah had shown up wearing a new designer purse that probably cost more than I spend on groceries in 2 months, and I couldn't help myself. I had to say something. Must be nice to throw money around like that when your mother's counting every penny just to keep the lights on. That's what set her off. That's what made her grab that piggy bank from the clearance shelf in my store and slam it down like some kind of weapon. You know what, Mom? Here, save every precious penny. Save it all for your funeral, because God knows we'll need it to bury you with all your complaints. The door slammed so hard, the little bell I'd hung there 20 years ago nearly fell off its hook. I stood there for maybe 10 minutes, just staring at that pig. Pretty little thing, really. Someone had taken time to paint those roses so carefully, each petal shaded just right. The kind of work people don't appreciate anymore. Everything's mass-produced now, no soul in it. But this pig, this had love painted into every brush stroke. Made me wonder about the hands that created it, the story behind it, ending up on my clearance shelf. That first night, I couldn't sleep. Keep thinking about Harold, how he used to laugh when I'd get worked up about the kids spending money foolishly. "Rose," he'd say in that patient voice of his. "They're young. Let them be young." Easy for him to say. He never had to balance a checkbook with 3 teenagers asking for everything under the sun. He never had to smile and nod when the other mothers talked about their family vacations while I was clipping coupons and shopping at thrift stores. The next morning, I found myself putting quarters in that pig. Just the change from my morning coffee at Murphy's Diner. Old Pete behind the counter looked at me funny when I asked for my change in quarters instead of bills, but I didn't explain. Wasn't anybody's business but mine. Walked home with those coins jingling in my pocket, and when I dropped them through that little slot in the pig's back, they made this satisfying thunk sound, like they belonged there. Sarah's words kept echoing, though. Save it for your funeral. The more I thought about it, the more it made sense in a twisted way. I am 72. I've outlived my husband, my parents, most of my friends from school. Sarah wasn't wrong about needing money for a funeral. What she was wrong about was thinking I'd be a burden. I've never been a burden to anyone, and I wasn't about to start now, so I kept feeding that pig. Every time I chose the generic brand over the name brand at the grocery store, the difference went in. When I decided to skip my weekly hair appointment and do it myself, $25 went in. When Margaret from book club offered to give me her old winter coat instead of me buying a new one, the money I saved went straight to that pig. The funny thing was, the more money I put in, the more I started noticing about that pig. The detail work was incredible. Whoever painted it had signed their initials in tiny letters under the belly, EM. The paint job wasn't just random flowers either. Looking closer, I could see they were specific types: roses, carnations, forget-me-nots. My mother's favorite flowers. Made me wonder if that was coincidence or if there was something more to this little pig finding its way to me. Week after week, I developed this routine. Morning coffee, check the pig's weight by lifting it carefully, estimate how much was in there. It became a game, trying to guess. The pig got heavier, and something strange started happening with my kids. Sarah began calling more often. Nothing dramatic, just checking in. "How are you feeling, Mom?" "Do you need anything from the store?" Like she was testing the waters, seeing if I was still angry. Michael, my middle child, started showing up with groceries. "Found a great sale on your favorite tea, Mom. Thought you might want some." He'd stay for coffee, tell me about his job at the auto shop, ask my opinion about things. Michael never asked my opinion about anything. Always thought he knew better, always rushing off to the next thing. Even Linda, my eldest, made more effort. Started bringing her kids around more often, letting them spend Saturday afternoons with me while she ran errands. Those grandkids of mine love hearing stories, and I found myself telling them tales I hadn't thought about in years. About their grandfather, about the old days when this town was smaller and everybody knew everybody else's business. But late at night, when the house got quiet and it was just me and that pig, I'd find myself wondering if maybe there was truth in what Sarah had said. Was I just saving up for my own end? Was that all I had to look forward to? Then came the day I was dusting that pig, being extra careful around those delicate painted flowers, when I noticed something odd. The bottom of the pig moved slightly when I pressed it. Not much, just a little give that shouldn't have been there. Turned it over and looked more carefully. There was a seam, barely visible, like the bottom could be removed somehow. Took me an hour and a magnifying glass to figure it out. You had to press just right on 2 specific spots, and the bottom panel would slide away. Inside, tucked into a little compartment I never would have found if I hadn't been cleaning so thoroughly, was a small golden key. Tiny thing, delicate as jewelry, with intricate scrollwork that looked old, really old. I held that key up to the light streaming through my kitchen window, and my hands were shaking. 72 years old, and I felt like a child finding buried treasure. What kind of lock would need such a small, ornate key? And why was it hidden in a piggy bank that ended up on my clearance shelf? That night, I called Linda. Didn't tell her about the key, just asked casual-like if she'd ever seen anything like my piggy bank before. "You know, Mom, now that you mention it, there's something familiar about it. Reminds me of the kind of things Grandma Rose used to have around her house. You remember how she collected those little decorative pieces? Grandma Rose, Harold's mother, the woman who left me this store, this building, this whole life I'd been living since Harold died. She'd had a house full of beautiful things, collectibles and antiques that we'd mostly donated after she passed because none of us kids had room for all of it. What if this pig had been hers originally? What if it somehow made its way back to me through the donation circuit? The more I thought about it, the more questions I had. Grandma Rose had been private about certain things. Always said she'd tell us family stories when the time was right. But then she passed so sudden with that heart attack, and we never got those stories. Maybe she'd left more than just stories behind. Maybe she'd left clues. Started going through boxes in the attic, things I'd stored away and forgotten about. Found her recipe box, her sewing supplies, some old photographs I hadn't looked at in years. And there, in a shoebox full of miscellaneous items, I found something that made my heart stop. A photograph of that exact piggy bank sitting on Grandma Rose's mantle, clear as day. But in the photo, it wasn't alone. There were other pieces around it, a whole collection I'd never paid attention to when I was younger. One item in particular caught my eye. A small music box sitting right next to the pig in the photograph. Wooden, with intricate carving on the top, and what looked like a tiny keyhole on the front. A keyhole that might just fit the key I'd found. But where was that music box now? We donated everything, or so I thought. Unless Grandma Rose had been more careful about certain items, made sure they were separated from the general donations. Unless she'd planned for someone to find that key someday and go looking for what it opened. I couldn't sleep that night. Kept thinking about all the conversations I'd half listened to over the years, all the times Grandma Rose had tried to tell me about the family history, and I'd been too busy with my own problems to pay attention. She'd mentioned having a special collection, things with sentimental value that she hoped would stay in the family. At the time, I'd assumed she meant her jewelry or her china set. The next morning, I called every antique shop and consignment store in a 50-mile radius. Described the music box from the photograph, asked if they'd seen anything like it. Most of them were helpful, but came up empty. Then I talked to Mrs. Henderson at Second Chances, the consignment shop 2 towns over. "Funny you should ask," she said. I've got a box of musical items that came from an estate sale a few years back. Never really went through it properly. Owner said they were from someone named Rose, but I can't remember the last name. My heart was pounding so hard, I thought I might need to sit down. Would it be possible for me to come take a look at what you have? Of course, honey. I'm here until 5 today. Drove over there that afternoon with the key in my pocket, trying not to get my hopes up too high. Mrs. Henderson was a sweet woman, probably my age, with gray hair and kind eyes behind thick glasses. She led me to a storage room in the back where she kept items that hadn't made it to the sales floor yet. "Here's the box," she said, pulling out a medium-sized cardboard box labeled Musical Items, Rose Estate. "You're welcome to look through it. Take your time." First thing I pulled out was a small wooden music box, exactly like the one in the photograph. My hands were shaking as I examined the tiny keyhole. The key fit perfectly. Turned it slow and careful, and the lid popped open with a soft click. Inside was lined with faded red velvet, and tucked into the lining were several folded papers and a small black and white photograph. The photograph showed a young man in military uniform, handsome face, serious eyes, standing next to what looked like a train station. On the back, someone had written, "For Rose, until we meet again, your devoted Edward, 1943. Edward, not Harold's father, whose name was William. This was someone else entirely. Someone who'd been important enough to Grandma Rose that she'd kept his photograph in a music box with a hidden key. The papers were letters, written in careful handwriting that was hard to read but clearly old. I could make out phrases here and there. "My dearest Rose, thinking of you every day. When this war is over, promise me you'll wait." Letters from Edward to Grandma Rose, hidden away for decades in a music box that somehow ended up in a consignment shop, waiting for someone with the right key to find them. But that wasn't all. At the bottom of the music box, underneath the velvet lining, I found another piece of paper. This one was different, newer, written in Grandma Rose's own handwriting that I recognized from grocery lists and Christmas cards. It was addressed to me. "Dear Rose," it began, and my heart just about stopped. "If you're reading this, then you found the pig and you found the key, which means you're ready to know the truth about our family." My hands wouldn't stop shaking as I read those words written in Grandma Rose's familiar script. "If you're reading this, then you found the pig and you found the key, which means you're ready to know the truth about our family." The consignment shop suddenly felt too small, too quiet, like the walls were closing in on decades of secrets I never knew existed. Mrs. Henderson noticed my distress and brought me a chair. "Are you all right, dear? You look like you've seen a ghost." If only she knew how close to the truth that was. I folded the letter carefully and slipped it into my purse along with the photograph and the key. "I'll take the music box," I managed to say. "How much do you want for it?" "Oh, honey, after seeing how much it means to you, just take it. Consider it a gift from one Rose to another." The drive home was a blur. Every red light felt like torture. Every minute stretched like an hour. I needed to read that letter properly, needed to understand what Grandma Rose had been trying to tell me all these years. When I finally got home, I went straight to the kitchen table where that piggy bank sat waiting, like it had been watching over everything this whole time. Grandma Rose's letter was longer than I'd first realized, written on both sides of 2 sheets of her good stationery. Her handwriting was careful, deliberate, like she'd thought about every word before putting pen to paper. "Dear Rose, if you're reading this, then you found the pig and you found the key, which means you're ready to know the truth about our family. I should have told you years ago, but some stories are too painful to share with the living. They're meant to be discovered, not told. Edward Morrison was the love of my life before I ever met William. We were engaged to be married in the spring of 1944, but the war had other plans. He shipped out in February, promised he'd write every day, promised we'd have our wedding the moment he came home. I waited. God help me, I waited for 3 years. The telegram came in 1947. Missing in action, presumed dead. They sent me his personal effects, including the letters I'd written him. But Edward wasn't dead, Rose. He was in a prisoner of war camp in Germany, and by the time he was freed and made his way home in 1949, I was already married to William and pregnant with Harold. Edward found me at the craft store one day in 1950. I nearly fainted when I saw him walk through that door. Still handsome, still kind, but with something broken in his eyes that hadn't been there before. He told me about the camp, about the years he spent thinking about our future together, about coming home to find I'd moved on. I wanted to run away with him that day. I wanted to abandon everything and everyone for the man I'd never stopped loving. But I had Harold to think about, and William was a good man who didn't deserve to have his world destroyed. So Edward and I made a different choice. We chose to love each other in secret, through letters, through small gestures, through a connection that sustained us both for 43 years. Edward never married, said he couldn't give his heart to anyone else when it already belonged to me. He bought a small house 3 towns over and started a business fixing watches and clocks. Said time had stopped for him anyway, so he might as well make a living helping other people's time keep moving. Every month for 43 years, Edward sent me a letter. Sometimes just a few lines about the weather or what he was reading. Sometimes pages and pages about his dreams, his regrets, his enduring love for a woman he could never have. I kept every single letter, Rose. They're hidden throughout this house, waiting for someone who cares enough about family history to find them. Edward also sent money. Not much at first, just a few dollars here and there that he insisted I use for something beautiful. But as his business grew, the amounts grew too. He paid for Harold's college education, though Harold never knew it. He helped with the down payment on this house. When William got sick, Edward paid most of the medical bills through a fake insurance claim he arranged with a friend who worked at the hospital. The craft store was Edward's idea. He said I needed something that was mine, something that would let me create beauty in the world, even if I couldn't have the life I dreamed of. He provided the startup money, helped me find suppliers, even designed the layout of the store, all through intermediaries, all carefully hidden so William would never suspect. When Edward died in 1993, he left everything to me, but I couldn't claim it directly without raising questions I wasn't prepared to answer. So his lawyer, James Mitchell in Springfield, has been holding Edward's estate in trust, waiting for the right person from our family to come forward with the proper documentation. That's where you come in, dear Rose. Edward left specific instructions. His estate can only be claimed by someone who demonstrates genuine care for family history and an appreciation for hidden beauty. He believed that kind of person would find the clues he and I left behind. The piggy bank was his idea. He painted it himself in his final months, using the same flowers from my wedding bouquet that he'd pressed and kept all those years. Inside Edward's estate, you'll find enough money to secure your future and help your children build theirs. But more importantly, you'll find the complete story of a love that transcended time and circumstance. Edward documented everything, Rose. Every sacrifice he made for our family, every anonymous gift, every moment of joy he found in loving someone he could never have. The lawyer's address is written on the back of this letter. Take the music box, the key, and Edward's photograph. Tell Mr. Mitchell that you're there to claim the Morrison estate on behalf of the woman who never forgot her first love. He'll know what to do. I'm sorry I never told you this story while I was alive. Some secrets are too fragile to share in the daylight. They need to be discovered in their own time, by someone ready to understand that love comes in many forms, and the greatest sacrifices are often invisible to the world. Use Edward's gift wisely, dear Rose. He would have wanted it to bring our family peace and security. And remember that sometimes the most precious inheritances aren't money at all, but the knowledge that we are loved far more deeply than we ever imagined. With all my love and hopes for your happiness, Grandma Rose. P.S. Look for my other letters to you in the old recipe box in the attic. I have so much more to tell you about our family's hidden stories. I set the letter down with tears streaming down my face. 43 years of secret love, of sacrifice, of a man who loved our family from the shadows and provided for us in ways we never knew. Edward Morrison. The name felt sacred somehow, like something I should whisper rather than speak aloud. The address on the back was for James Mitchell, attorney at law in Springfield, about an hour's drive from here. I looked at the clock and realized it was already past 4. Too late to drive there today, But first thing tomorrow morning, I was going to learn the rest of this incredible story. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about Grandma Rose and the weight she must have carried all those years. Loving two men, making impossible choices, living with secrets that must have felt like they were burning holes in her heart. And Edward, spending his entire life loving a woman he couldn't have, providing for her family, finding meaning in anonymous generosity. I called Linda around 8 o'clock. Didn't tell her everything, just said I'd been going through some of Grandma Rose's old things and found some interesting family history. Did you know Grandma had a fiancé before Grandpa William? Really? She never mentioned that. What happened to him? War, apparently. I'm still piecing the story together. That was true enough. Linda, do you remember her ever talking about someone named Edward? Long pause. You know, now that you mention it, there was this one time when I was maybe 12. I found her crying in the kitchen over a letter, and when I asked what was wrong, she said something about Edward being sick. I assumed it was a relative I didn't know. Why? Just trying to understand our family history better. I'll tell you more when I know more. After I hung up, I went to the attic and found that recipe box Grandma Rose had mentioned. Sure enough, tucked between index cards for apple pie and pot roast, I found 3 more letters addressed to me. These were shorter, more recent, written in the months before Grandma Rose died. In the first letter, she explained how she'd arranged for the piggy bank to end up in my store's inventory after her death. She'd made a deal with the estate sale company to donate most items to charity, but to hold back certain pieces and gradually introduce them to local shops as discovered inventory. The pig was meant to find its way to me eventually, when I was ready to appreciate its significance. The second letter contained detailed instructions about Edward's watch repair shop, which had been closed since his death, but was still full of valuable equipment and inventory. Edward always said that time was the most precious gift we could give each other, she wrote. His shop contains 30 years' worth of carefully maintained timepieces, many of them antiques worth far more than their original owners realized. This collection is part of your inheritance, too. The third letter was the most emotional. Grandma Rose described her final years, how she'd often imagined what it would be like to tell our family about Edward, to share the story of their love openly instead of carrying it alone. But some stories are meant to be gifts, she wrote, and the best gifts are the ones that come when we need them most, not when we expect them. I thought about Sarah's cruel words, about my fear of being a burden, about the months I'd spent feeding that piggy bank with my small savings. Had Grandma Rose somehow known I'd reached this point in my life? This moment when I'd need hope more than anything else? Had she and Edward planned this revelation for exactly the right time? The next morning, I was at James Mitchell's office when it opened at 9. He was an older gentleman, probably close to 80, with white hair and kind eyes that reminded me of Edward's photograph. When I introduced myself as Rose Patterson and mentioned the Morrison estate, his whole face lit up. Rose Patterson, I've been waiting to meet you for over 30 years. Please sit down. Can I get you coffee? Tea? He was clearly excited, bustling around his office like a man who'd been holding on to wonderful news for decades and finally had someone to share it with. Edward Morrison was one of the finest men I ever knew, Mr. Mitchell began, settling behind his desk with a thick file folder. When he first came to me in 1993, dying of cancer, but still more concerned about providing for your family than his own comfort, I thought he was either a saint or a fool. Turns out, he was both. He opened the folder and spread documents across his desk. Bank statements, property deeds, insurance policies, investment records. The numbers made my head spin. Edward hadn't just left me a modest inheritance. He'd spent 30 years carefully building wealth with the specific purpose of caring for Grandma Rose's family after his death. The estate is currently worth approximately $800,000, Mr. Mitchell said calmly, like he was discussing the weather. That includes his house, his watch repair business and inventory, several rental properties he acquired over the years, and a carefully managed investment portfolio. Edward was quite brilliant with money, actually. Said if he couldn't spend his life with the woman he loved, he'd spend it building a legacy for her family. $800,000. I couldn't even process that number. It was more money than I'd seen in my entire lifetime, more than I'd ever imagined having. But Mr. Mitchell wasn't finished. "There's also this," he said, pulling out a sealed envelope with my name written in Edward's careful handwriting. "He wrote this for you specifically, though he never knew your name or even if Rose would have a daughter-in-law. He just knew that someday someone from her family would be sitting in this chair, and he wanted to explain his choices directly." My hands were shaking again as I opened Edward's final letter. His handwriting was weaker than Grandma Rose's, clearly written by someone who was very sick, but the words were strong and clear. "Dear Rose's family member, if you're reading this, then the woman I loved for 51 years has shared our secret with you. I hope you can understand and forgive the unusual nature of my devotion. I hope you can see that love sometimes requires sacrifice, and the greatest gift we can give the people we care about is security and peace of mind. I never had children of my own, never built a traditional family, never experienced most of the joys that other men take for granted. But through my love for Rose, I became part of your family in the only way possible for me. Every dollar I've saved, every investment I've made, every sacrifice I've chosen has been motivated by my desire to care for the people she cared about. Use this inheritance to build the life you deserve. Use it to help your children, to secure your future, to create beauty in the world. But most of all, use it to understand that you are more loved than you ever imagined, by people both seen and unseen, and that love like this never truly dies." I was crying openly now, understanding for the first time in my life what it meant to be part of something bigger than myself. Edward Morrison had loved my family for 5 decades without ever asking for anything in return. He'd been the anonymous benefactor behind so many small miracles, the invisible foundation that had kept us stable through difficult times. And now, at 72, when I'd been worried about being a burden to my children, I was inheriting enough money to make sure I never had to depend on anyone again. More than that, I was inheriting enough to help my children build their own security, to be the foundation for them that Edward had been for us. But the most precious inheritance wasn't the money at all. It was the knowledge that I was part of a love story that had lasted 51 years, that had shaped my entire life in ways I never understood, and that would continue to shape my family's future for generations to come. The drive home from the lawyer's office felt like floating through a dream where nothing was quite real anymore. $800,000. A love story spanning 5 decades. A man who devoted his entire life to caring for our family from the shadows. I kept glancing at the paperwork on my passenger seat, half expecting it to disappear like morning mist. But it remained stubbornly real, changing everything I thought I knew about my life. When I pulled into my driveway, Sarah's car was there. My heart clenched, remembering her cruel words about the piggy bank, about saving money for my funeral. How wrong she'd been, and how right she'd been at the same time. That piggy bank had been about death, but not my death. It had been about Edward's death, about Grandma Rose's death, about the end of a secret love story that was only now beginning to bloom into something the living could understand. Sarah was sitting at my kitchen table when I walked in, tears streaming down her face, staring at that porcelain pig like it had personally betrayed her. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I've been thinking about what I said, about the funeral comment, and I feel sick about it. I didn't mean it. I was just angry about money, and I took it out on you, and that's not fair. You've sacrificed everything for us kids, and here I am acting like a spoiled brat because you called out my spending." I set my purse down carefully, wondering how to begin explaining that her thoughtless comment had actually unlocked the most incredible gift our family had ever received. "Sarah, honey, what you said hurt me deeply, but sometimes the most painful words lead us exactly where we need to go." She looked up at me with red, swollen eyes. "What do you mean?" I sat down across from her, reached into my purse, and pulled out Edward's photograph. This man loved our family for 51 years, and we never even knew his name. I placed the picture between us, watching Sarah's expression change from confusion to wonder as I began to tell her everything. By the time I finished the story, Sarah was crying again, but these were different tears. "Mom, are you telling me that Grandma Rose had a secret love affair for 43 years, and that this Edward person has been like our family's guardian angel this whole time? That's exactly what I'm telling you. And Sarah, there's more. I showed her the bank statements, the investment records, the deed transfers. Watched her face go through every emotion I'd experienced in the lawyer's office. Shock, disbelief, overwhelming gratitude, and finally, a deep shame that I recognized because I'd felt it too. Oh God, Mom. All those times I complained about money, all those times I acted like you were being stingy or unreasonable, and you've been struggling while sitting on information about this incredible gift. She buried her face in her hands. I'm the worst daughter in the world. No, sweetheart, you're human. And you couldn't have known something I didn't know myself until yesterday. I reached across the table and took her hands. But Sarah, this inheritance comes with responsibility. It's not just money. It's a legacy of love and sacrifice that we need to honor. That evening, I called Michael and Linda, asked them to come over for dinner. Didn't tell them why, just said it was important family business. Michael arrived first, looking worried and carrying flowers from the grocery store. Mom, you sounded serious on the phone. Are you okay? Is something wrong with your health? My health is fine, but everything else in our lives is about to change in ways you can't imagine. Linda came in with her 2 teenagers, apologizing for bringing them, but explaining that her babysitter had canceled. That's perfect, I said. This story involves all of us, including the grandchildren. We gathered in the living room, and I started from the beginning. The piggy bank, Sarah's cruel comment, the hidden key, the music box, Grandma Rose's letters, Edward's incredible legacy. I watched my family's faces as understanding dawned, as they realized that everything they thought they knew about our history was just the surface of something much deeper and more beautiful. Michael was the first to speak when I finished. Mom, are you saying that when I was struggling to start the auto shop 5 years ago, and you somehow managed to help with the down payment, even though I knew you didn't have that kind of money, that was actually coming from this Edward guy? I nodded, remembering how Grandma Rose had insisted on helping Michael, even though it had seemed impossible at the time. Now I understood where that money had really come from. Edward's instructions were very specific. Help the family in times of need, but never let them feel like charity cases. Always make it seem like the help was coming from family resources. Linda was holding Edward's photograph, studying his face with the intensity she usually reserved for her medical journals. Mom, this explains so much. Remember when Dad got sick? How you managed to keep the house and the store running, even with all those medical bills? I always wondered how you did it financially. Edward did it. Through Grandma Rose, through careful arrangements with hospitals and insurance companies, through a network of kindness that I never suspected existed. Sarah had been quiet through most of the conversation, but now she spoke up. What happens now? I mean, this is life-changing money, but it feels too big, too important to just spend on ourselves. That's when I knew my youngest daughter had truly grown up. The woman who'd walked into my store a week ago, complaining about my frugality, was now thinking about legacy and responsibility. Edward left specific instructions about that too. The money is meant to provide security and opportunity, not luxury. He wanted it used to help the family build something lasting. Over the next few weeks, we had countless family meetings, long conversations about values, about what Edward and Grandma Rose would have wanted, about how to honor their legacy while building our own future. Michael's auto shop could expand, maybe hire some young people from the neighborhood who needed steady work. Linda could finally go back to school and finish her nursing degree without worrying about tuition. Sarah could start the small business she'd always talked about, something creative that would add beauty to the world the way Edward had wanted. And me? I could stop worrying about being a burden and start thinking about how to use my remaining years to build something meaningful. The craft store could become more than just a business. It could become a community center, a place where people came to learn traditional skills, to connect with each other, to create beauty with their hands. But first, I wanted to visit Edward's house and his watch repair shop. Mr. Mitchell had given me the keys and the address, said I should take my time exploring, that there were more surprises waiting to be discovered. The house was small but immaculate, filled with carefully maintained antiques and hundreds of books. Every room told the story of a man who'd lived thoughtfully, who'd found joy in simple pleasures, who'd never stopped hoping for something just out of reach. In his bedroom, I found a collection of photographs that took my breath away. Pictures of our family that he'd somehow obtained over the years. Harold's graduation, my wedding, the grandchildren's birthday parties. He'd been watching over us, celebrating our milestones from a distance, loving us in the only way he could. The watch repair shop was even more incredible. Row after row of vintage timepieces, some of them worth more than my old car, all carefully cataloged and maintained. But the real treasure was Edward's workshop diary, where he'd recorded not just repairs and sales, but thoughts about time, about love, about the meaning of a life spent in service to others. One entry, dated just months before his death, brought me to my knees. 49 years since I last held Rose in my arms, but every sunrise still feels like a gift because I know she's watching the same sky. Every watch I repair is a small victory against the passage of time, a tiny rebellion against the forces that keep us apart. When I'm gone, I hope someone will understand that love like ours doesn't end with death. It transforms into something else, something that can provide for the living long after the lovers are gone. That's when I found the final surprise. Hidden in Edward's desk drawer, wrapped in tissue paper that had yellowed with age, was Grandma Rose's wedding bouquet. Pressed and preserved, every flower still recognizable even after all these decades. Roses, carnations, forget-me-nots. The same flowers he'd painted on that piggy bank, the same ones he'd been looking at every day for 51 years. Attached to the bouquet was one last letter, this one addressed to whoever would eventually find it. These flowers are proof that some love stories never end. They just wait patiently for the right person to continue telling them. The woman who carried this bouquet was the love of my life, and caring for her family has been my life's greatest privilege. Use what I've left behind to write the next chapter of this love story. Make it beautiful. 3 months later, we had the grand reopening of what was now called Rose's Community Craft Center. The whole town came out to celebrate, including Mrs. Henderson from the consignment shop, Mr. Mitchell the lawyer, and dozens of people whose lives had been touched by Edward's anonymous generosity over the years. Because once word got out about his story, we discovered that our family wasn't his only beneficiary. Edward Morrison had been quietly helping half the town for decades, and now they all wanted to share their memories of mysterious good fortune and unexpected kindness. Michael expanded his auto shop and hired 3 young mechanics, creating the apprentice program he'd always dreamed of. Linda enrolled in nursing school and set up a study space in the community center where other adults could pursue their education. Sarah opened a small art studio in the back of the craft center, teaching children to paint with the same attention to detail that Edward had shown on that piggy bank. And that piggy bank? It sits in a place of honor in the center, next to a display telling Edward and Grandma Rose's love story. People come from all over the state to hear about the secret romance that lasted 51 years, about the man who loved a family so completely that his care extended far beyond his own lifetime. But the real transformation was in me. I stopped worrying about being a burden and started thinking about what kind of legacy I wanted to leave. At 72, I discovered that life's greatest adventures sometimes begin with the most painful words, and that the deepest treasures are often hidden in the most ordinary places. Sarah and I have a tradition now. Every morning, we meet at the craft center before it opens, share coffee, and talk about our plans for the day. Last week, she brought me another piggy bank, this one shaped like a cat with tiny painted butterflies. "For your next adventure, Mom," she said with a smile that held no trace of the cruelty that had started this whole journey. I laughed and accepted the gift, thinking about Edward's workshop diary, about his belief that love transforms rather than ending. That new piggy bank sits on my counter now, waiting for whatever story it's meant to tell. And sometimes, late at night when the house is quiet, I think I can hear Edward's voice in the wind, whispering words of gratitude that his love finally found its way home. The funny thing about Sarah's original comment, "Save it for your funeral," is that she was right in a way she never intended. That piggy bank did lead to a kind of funeral. The death of my old fears, my old limitations, my old story about what was possible for a 72-year-old widow. In its place, something new was born, something beautiful and unexpected and full of hope. Sometimes the most careless words carry the most careful magic. Sometimes the cruelest moments crack us open exactly where we need to be broken. And sometimes, if we're very lucky, the people who hurt us end up being the ones who save us, even when they don't know they're doing it. Edward Morrison taught me that love is the most patient force in the universe. It can wait 51 years for the right moment to reveal itself. It can work through piggy banks and secret keys and hidden compartments. It can transform strangers into family and turn painful words into doorways to grace. And Grandma Rose taught me that the most precious secrets are the ones we leave behind for others to discover. Like love letters written to people we'll never meet. Like inheritance wrapped in mystery and delivered exactly when it's needed most. I'm 72 years old, and I'm just beginning to understand that some stories are too big for one lifetime. They require multiple generations, multiple hearts, multiple chances to get them right. The story that began with Edward and Grandma Rose in 1943 continued through that piggy bank in my kitchen, and it will keep going long after I'm gone, carried forward by children and grandchildren who understand that love like this never really dies. It just waits patiently for the next person brave enough to follow the clues, turn the key, and discover that being loved is the greatest inheritance of all.